The screens all glowed green while the 47th floor burned. Perfect pressure readings, optimal flow rates. Every diagnostic confirmed the automated system was functioning flawlessly. Yet, orange flames climbed the atrium walls and black smoke poured from ventilation shafts. The young building engineers stared at their monitors, their confidence in the technology absolute, even as the physical reality screamed otherwise. Chief Fire Officer Miller ignored their protests and made the call. His voice was low, urgent. "I need Eli Vance, now." The conflict was set, digital certainty against physical truth, algorithms against instinct, the new world against the old. The lead engineer, a man named Carter with a crisp white shirt and a tablet full of schematics, intercepted Chief Miller as he arrived on the smoke-filled floor. "Chief, our AI confirms all suppression systems are fully operational and responding within design parameters. The building is handling this. Your crews should fall back and let the technology do its job." His tone was condescending, a man explaining basic arithmetic to a child. Miller just looked past him, his eyes scanning the choking haze. "The building is on fire, son. Your screens are lying." Carter bristled. "The system doesn't lie. It has 1,000,000 data points. If there was a problem, we'd know." Just then, the service elevator dinged. The doors slid open to reveal an old man. Eli Vance stood there, his posture relaxed, his eyes already assessing the situation. He wore faded work pants and a jacket that had seen more fires than this entire engineering team combined. His hands, rough and weathered, were tucked into his pockets. Carter scoffed, his eyes running over the unimpressive figure. "This is your solution? We have a multi-billion-dollar AI and you called a handyman?" Eli ignored him completely. He stepped off the elevator and walked past the cluster of engineers as if they weren't there. He didn't look at their screens or their tablets. He moved to the perimeter of the vast office space, his head tilted. He wasn't diagnosing. He was listening. He ran a hand along a scorched drywall surface, feeling the heat pattern. He placed his palm flat against a cold water pipe, his eyes closed, sensing for the faintest vibration. He studied the way the smoke curled and drifted near the ceiling, reading the air currents like a map. Carter followed him, his frustration mounting. "What are you even doing? Our sensors show perfect pressure and flow rates in every conduit on this floor. The water is right where it's supposed to be." Eli didn't turn around. His voice was a low, gravelly murmur, almost lost in the crackle of the distant fire. "Buildings breathe. This one's holding its breath. The water's in the pipes, but it's not going to the fire," a younger engineer snickered. "It breathes? Is it allergic to smoke too?" The derision was palpable. Chief Miller stepped between them, his own patience wearing thin. "He's here because I called him. His methods work when yours don't." Carter shook his head, his professional pride wounded. "With all due respect, Chief, this is a massive liability. He's not on our insurance. He's not certified on this building's systems. He's a retired city fire marshal, for God's sake. Our protocols are very clear." Eli had moved to a section of wall where the smoke seemed to seep from between the seams of the drywall. He knelt down, his attention absolute. The engineers watched him, a mixture of confusion and contempt on their faces. They saw a relic, a man from a time before smart buildings, utterly out of his depth. They trusted their blinking lights and data streams. They could not comprehend a man who trusted his hands. The building manager, a man in a suit that cost more than Eli's truck, arrived on the scene, his face flushed with panic and irritation. He zeroed in on Chief Miller, waving a phone. "Miller, what is this? Corporate is on the line. They're seeing our internal feeds. Who is this civilian? He's not on the approved vendor list. He's a walking lawsuit. I want him out, now." Eli, still kneeling by the wall, pointed a steady finger at a small discolored panel nearly hidden behind a networking cabinet. "That one. I need it opened." Carter let out a short, sharp laugh. "That's a decommissioned chase for the original manual overrides. It hasn't been used since the smart system was installed 5 years ago. There's nothing in there but deadlines and dust. The diagnostics don't even register it exists." The manager nodded vigorously. "See? He's pointing at museum pieces. He's obstructing a critical emergency response. Security! Escort this man from the building immediately." Two building security guards began to move forward, their hands hovering near their belts. The tension coiled tight, a palpable force in the smoky air. Eli didn't move. His calmness was a stark contrast to the escalating panic around him. He simply looked at the chief, his expression unreadable. The smoke, which had seemed to stabilize, suddenly intensified, pouring from a new vent with a hungry roar. The engineers flinched back, their screens still stubbornly, impossibly green. The alarms continued their steady, useless wail. The chief planted his feet, his voice dropping into a low, dangerous register. "Touch him, and you'll be dealing with me." The guards hesitated, looking from the chief to their boss. The manager sputtered, his phone pressed to his ear. "They're refusing to comply. It's a total breach of protocol." Eli remained focused on the wall, on that single, insignificant panel, as if it held the only truth in the burning tower. But not everyone in the crowd was merely watching. A young apprentice firefighter, a kid named Peterson on his first major high-rise call, had been watching the old man. He'd seen the way Eli moved through the smoke, not with panic, but with a profound, weary familiarity. It wasn't arrogance. It was a deep, unshakable knowing. He saw the way the engineers dismissed him, the way security moved in, and something in his gut twisted. He remembered his grandfather, a quiet pipe fitter who could diagnose a building's sickness by listening to its walls. As the confrontation hung in the air, Peterson stepped back into the relative quiet of a service stairwell. His hands shook as he pulled out his personal phone, scrolling through his contacts. It was a massive breach of protocol, a risk that could end his career before it began. But his gut screamed at him to do it. He found the number for a retired deputy chief who sometimes came to speak at the academy, a man who told stories of the old days. The phone rang twice. "Davies," a gruff voice answered. "Sir, this is firefighter Peterson, ladder 12. I'm sorry to call you directly, sir, but it's about an old marshal, Eli Vance. He's here at the Pinnacle Tower fire." There was a dead silence on the other end. Then, "Is he all right?" "He's fine, sir, but the situation is not good. The building engineers and their manager, they're treating him like he's senile. They're laughing. They won't let him near the systems. They've called security on him. They're relying on their computers, sir. And the computers say everything is fine, but the floor is fully involved. This man, Mr. Vance, he looks like he knows something they don't." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush stone. Peterson heard a muffled oath, the sound of a chair scraping back violently. Then, the deputy chief's voice, now directed away from the phone. "Maggie, get me Chief Miller's direct line. Now, and get me the number for that building's head of security." He came back on the line, his voice a low, urgent growl. "Son, you stay right there. You did good. You understand me? You did the right thing." Back in his quiet suburban home, the retired deputy chief, a man whose own career was built on the foundation Eli Vance had helped pour, made two calls. The first was to Chief Miller's encrypted radio. The second was longer. He spoke to a stunned building security director, his voice cold and sharp as broken glass. "That man your people are about to drag out of there is Elias Vance. They called him the ghost of the valley. For 30 years, he was the one they called when a fire didn't make sense, when buildings burned from the inside out for reasons nobody could diagnose. He didn't read manuals. He read the building itself, the heat shiver in a steel beam, the sound of water moving, or not moving, in a pipe 3 floors away. He designed the original fire suppression schematic for that tower of yours during its first renovation. He insisted on a mechanical fail-safe the new owners deemed unnecessary and decommissioned, a system that isn't on your pretty digital maps. If he's pointing at a wall, you tear the damn wall down. You ignore him, and that building comes down. Now you get on your radio and you stand your men down." The building owner arrived then, a man named Sterling, whose tailored suit seemed to repel the very dust in the air. He took one look at the scene, the arguing chiefs, the defiant engineers, the ancient fire marshal kneeling by a wall, and his face tightened into a mask of cold fury. He went straight to Chief Miller, bypassing the smoke and the tension as if they were mere inconveniences. "Miller, I've been on with my board. This is unacceptable. We have the most advanced fire control system on the planet. Your man is creating a dangerous distraction. My engineers say the building is managing the incident. I am giving the order to fully evacuate your personnel and let the automated protocols execute." His voice left no room for argument. It was the final word from the top of the pyramid, the ultimate validation of the engineer's digital faith. Carter nodded, a smug vindication hardening his features. The security guards moved forward again, their purpose clear. Eli Vance finally rose from his crouch. He didn't look at the owner or the guards. He looked at a section of the ceiling beam directly above them, a place where the smoke was a different color, a thinner, grayer wisps against the black. He pointed, his finger steady. "There," he said, his voice cutting through the din. "The main fire isn't in the vents. It's in the interstitial space between the 47th and 48th floors. It's been burning along the cable raceways for 20 minutes. Your thermal sensors are in the rooms, not the walls. They can't see it." Sterling waved a dismissive hand. "Nonsense. The AI models heat transfer through 64 different building materials. It would know." Eli's pale blue eyes held the man's gaze. "The model doesn't account for the chemical fire load of the new networking insulation your team installed last month. It's burning fast and hot, right up into the main structural channel. You've got about 8 minutes before the thermal expansion on that primary support column becomes critical. It'll buckle at the weld point 12 feet from the northeast corner." He said it with such absolute, unshakable certainty that even Sterling hesitated. The specificity was terrifying. It wasn't a guess. It was a prediction. Chief Miller looked from the arrogant billionaire to the quiet old man, from the glowing green screens to the encroaching flames. He saw the truth not in the data, but in the set of Eli's shoulders, in the weary knowledge in his eyes. He made his choice. He keyed his radio, his voice booming through the floor. "All units, disregard evacuation order. Proceed with offensive interior attack. Ladder 12. I want a crew on the 48th floor, northeast quadrant, now. We're following Marshal Vance's lead." The shock on Sterling's face was total. Carter looked like he'd been physically struck. The chief had just bet the entire building and every life in it on the instincts of a retired marshal against the certainty of a billion-dollar system. Eli didn't wait for permission. He moved with a sudden startling purpose, heading for a blank section of drywall away from the main fire. "Here," he commanded, pointing at the unmarked surface. "Break through here." The firefighters, trained to follow orders, didn't hesitate. They swung their haligans, and the drywall crumbled away. Instead of the expected insulation and studs, they revealed a hidden service chase, a narrow space filled with a spaghetti tangle of old thick-gauge copper pipes and massive manually operated brass valves. It was a ghost system, a skeleton from the building's past that the new smart technology had rendered invisible. Carter stared, his mouth agape. That's the original mechanical override. It was supposed to be removed. The schematics show it was capped years ago." Eli was already pulling a worn leather tool roll from inside his jacket. The leather was stained dark with decades of soot and oil, the snap polish smooth by 1,000 anxious openings. "Your smart system is trying to pressurize a line that's pinched shut by a heat-warped actuator 2 floors down," he murmured, his fingers selecting a long, custom-ground wrench from the roll. "It's sending water in a loop, telling itself everything is fine while the real fire burns dry." He reached into the narrow space, his movements precise and economical. The custom wrench fit perfectly onto a rusted valve wheel that no standard tool could have gripped. With a grunt of effort that spoke of old muscles straining, he turned it. The valve screamed in protest, then gave way with a deep, satisfying clunk that resonated through the pipes. He moved to another, then a third, a plumber conducting a symphony only he could hear. "The main flow is diverted now," he said, his voice calm amidst the chaos. "It's bypassing the smart system completely. It's going where the water actually needs to be." For a long, agonizing moment, nothing happened. The fire roared. The engineers watched their screens, which still showed nothing. Sterling's face began to contort back into anger. Then a sound cut through the noise, a deep guttural groan from within the walls. It was the sound of a giant waking up. A moment later, a torrent of water exploded from the severed sprinkler heads, directly in the heart of the fire. Not a mist, not a spray. A solid, punishing deluge that immediately began to beat the flames into submission. The steam that erupted was white and clean, the steam of water meeting heat effectively for the first time. The fire's roar turned to a defeated hiss. On the engineers' monitors, the change was instantaneous and catastrophic. Alarms they had never seen before flashed crimson. Pressure readings plummeted in some sectors and skyrocketed in others. Flow meters went haywire. The AI, finally receiving data that matched a real-world catastrophe, began issuing a frantic cascade of error messages and system failure warnings. It was a damning confession of its own blindness. The screens, which had been a shield of green confidence, were now a mirror reflecting their total and absolute failure. They had been staring at a comforting fiction while the truth burned right behind the walls. The great beast of the fire began to die. Not with a bang, but with a sigh, a final steam-choked hiss as the ancient mechanical system, awakened by Eli's familiar touch, did what the billion-dollar AI could not. It delivered water. The violent orange glare softened to a dull, steaming glow. The choking black smoke thinned, replaced by the clean, sharp scent of wet charcoal and extinguished heat. The firefighters moved through the aftermath with a new purpose, their hoses now finding purchase, their efforts finally effective. And in the center of it all, the young engineers stood frozen, their faces illuminated by the frantic crimson flashes of their own screens. The perfect green world of their data had shattered, replaced by a chaotic tapestry of system failures, pressure collapses, and critical alerts. The truth, delayed and damning, had finally arrived via the very technology they had worshipped. They didn't look at the subdued fire. They couldn't tear their eyes from the monitors that documented their catastrophic misread of reality. Their arrogance had evaporated faster than the steam, leaving behind a hollow, silent shame. Carter, the lead engineer, simply sank onto an overturned filing cabinet, his head in his hands, staring at the wet, scarred floor. The building manager's phone was silent. He offered no more protests, no calls to corporate. He just watched the old man. Eli Vance wiped his custom wrench on a rag, the motion slow and methodical. He slid it back into the worn leather roll, the snap closing with a soft, final click. He didn't look at the humbled engineers. He didn't seek out the building owner for acknowledgement. He offered no lesson, no triumphant glance. His work was done. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod to Chief Miller, then turned and walked back toward the service elevator, his footsteps quiet on the sodden carpet. He disappeared into the lingering haze as quietly as he had arrived, a ghost returning to the past, leaving the modern world to grapple with the truth he had forced it to see. Chief Miller watched him go, then turned his gaze to his crew, to the soaked ruins of the office floor. He keyed his radio, his voice firm and clear, already thinking of the new protocols he would draft in the morning. I want a full manual sweep of all interstitial spaces, and someone find me the original architectural plans for this tower, the paper ones. The flames died not from algorithms, but from hands that understood stone and steel. If you value this wisdom that keeps our cities standing, share this story and subscribe to The Quiet Professionals for more tales of those who work where technology fails.